What is up, PGA fans? We are back. Another week of some golf fun. This week, we're heading out to Las Vegas. The Shriners Children's Hospital Open. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's a good event. It's a really good event. And for us, it's good to get back to what I would consider some normalcy, where we had a few of those JV tournaments, not a lot of our main guys playing. And now we're back. It's got a lot of the big names are playing. It's more of a normal looking tournament in terms of DraftKings player pool and things like that. So I'm really excited to break it down with you today. And before we dive in, as always, I'm joined by my trusted co-hosts, Sia Najad and Spencer Aguiar. Spencer, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's the tournament this week's in my hometown of Las Vegas, so it's always exciting to see a course I know up close and personal. And as you said, there's a lot of good players here. We always get a kind of a star-studded field for these off-season events here, so it should be a good tournament.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Sia, how about you?
I'm jealous of Spencer for a lot of things, but I'm kind of jealous that he lives in Las Vegas. Not because Las Vegas is that great. I mean, there's some overrated things about it too, I suppose, but it's just cool to say you're from Las Vegas. Now, I live in Miami, but I'm not from Miami. I'm from Northern Virginia. It's like DC area. I just think it's cool to say Las Vegas. Also, Curtis Samuel's only 3,000 on DraftKings for DFS. Is this the football show? I just had to point that out. He's only 3,000. His snap share is going to rise. Listen, play Curtis Samuel as your dart throw. All right, let's get back to golf.
I love it. Listen, you listen to our golf show, you make money in the NFL, and then we just also give you the winning plays in golf. It's just like a one-stop shop. This is all that is. Well, cool. I think this is good. I think we can dive right in and get into the player pool and the field. I think for today, let's change it up a little bit. Let's have Spencer kick us off with his breakdown. As we all know, Spencer's breakdown is super thorough, super in-depth, and it's really helpful to kind of get a start and a gauge on how to pick and how to target which golfers on this week's golf course. So Spencer, without further ado.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is a course I know very well. Bobby Weed masterminded the property on the rugged desert terrain in 1991, with Fuzzy Zeller serving as his consultant. The course itself meanders through arroyos and canyons, featuring lush bent grass greens to go along with friendly Bermuda rough. I use the word friendly because the rough is only 2 inches thick, but Bermuda rough can be sticky and cause some flyers for those that miss the short grass off the tee. Players don't seem overly concerned about that fact since driving distance is over 13 yards above tour average, but it is worth noting that some of the added length can be directly correlated to the slight altitude change and firm fairways from the Vegas heat. I think that gives us an artificial boost to some of the shorter hitters who are going to get more rollout than they are accustomed to having during a regular tour stop. The 3 par 5s and 2 short par 4s are the most accessible holes, and 4 of these are included during the final 6-hole stretch. There is a challenging par 3 17th, but that's really the only test for players coming in that they're going to have to be faced with. Overall, golfers that can demonstrate ball striking ability and strategy off the tee should exploit TPC Summerlin, since 9 of the past 11 winners have taken home the title at 20 under par or better. But as we always mention on this show, these birdie shootouts that don't highlight a particular skill set are a little more challenging to handicap. I tried to keep things predictive in a roundabout way, but there are some loopholes to get past since tournaments such as the Shriners will open up the field for more players to find success. But before I get into my exact statistical breakdown, I do want to note that I added a little more weight to my course history tab on my model. TPC Summerlin has ranked inside the top 15 of active courses when it comes to rollover predictability. That's a lot different than we saw last week at the Sandersons, which had some of the worst rollover predictability. I don't think that means someone playing it for the first time can't find success, but I would be more leery if a golfer has produced multiple failed experiences in the last few years. But from a statistical perspective, I weighted 8 categories this week. I started with strokes gained tee to green for 17.5%. I slightly reconfigured it from how the PGA Tour looks at the stat to try and make it more conducive towards TPC Summerlin. We saw the dispersion in scoring last year be about 15% for both off the tee and around the green. approach was 37%. I reallocated those percentages to remove putting from the equation entirely, which essentially gave me a weighted tee to green metric that incorporated 23% of my total on both off the tee and around the green and 54% on approach. I did 10% on both strokes gained total at easy courses and TPC courses over the last 50 rounds. As I mentioned, with 9 of the last 11 wins coming at 20 under par or better, it takes a specific type of player here. And then the TPC filter just works nicely since all TPC properties are somewhat the same as they're birdie fest. They're made for television. They're made for guys to go low at. Short par 4 plus par 5 birdie or better for 10%. That's about as low as you'll ever see me go for a non-par 70, but most holes out here provide the opportunity to make birdie. I thought pinpointing a specific set of any kind for a large weight was dangerous because it minimizes the impact that the other holes might have. Instead, I added another 15% for overall birdie or better percentage. I like the complete picture. This route took more of 25% of my total statistical data being derived by scoring, but it isn't being condensed into a specific range. Total driving for 17.5%. That is a 65-35 split of accuracy over distance. Yes, players average 13 yards more here off the tee, but I view that as a positive for the shorter hitters. As I mentioned, you're going to get a little extra rollout. Scrambling for 10%. I considered sand safe percentage because there are over 100 scattered throughout the property. And then I wrapped it up with 10% on strokes gained total on bent grass greens. That's just another way of looking for potential positive putting regression. I don't mind adding in 3-putt avoidance because these are larger complex that we have here, but I decided to keep my model where it was and use stats like that as more of an eye test than anything else.
I like it. Actually, what you broke that, I had one question I wanted to ask you, because I think you made a really smart point that I agree with, but I want to kind of figure out how you weigh it. You mentioned that when weighing course history, you want to more focus on guys who have a poor history versus maybe just like try and find the best golfer. Or you kind of said it as you kind of want to fade someone who's not playing, who hasn't done well here with consistency. Would you say it's better to look at it from hey, these are more players to fade because they've consistently not performed well versus try and target the guys who have the stronger history or equal?
I think that's one way to do it. I mean, I think when you look at it in that sense, you find a lot of really good head-to-head candidates to pick on, and that's more of a betting answer than anything, but you can fade them in the same sense of that. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I will do is I always have my statistical model, which I'm going to assess a ranking total or a power rating number to that. I'm going to have my current form. I'm going to have the course history. Those numbers will change based off of certain factors like this week, as I said, the course history has gone up with it. The statistics have remained the same. I put the current form down a little bit just because we are in a new season. That doesn't mean much because it was only a week-long break with it, but I thought it was enough so to where some of these guys are making their first start in like 4 or 5 weeks, and I will weight it. So I have it from the last 5 weeks, the last 10 weeks. I think that that's kind of a good set point from it. But one of the things I will do is I have a weighted total from it. So it'll look a little bit more in the recent form than the past form, which past being like longer than a 5-week period. And that's not like 10 tournaments for a player. That would be 10 weeks on tour. So dating back from this week, or I guess it would be last week to, 10 weeks ago on that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways. I think it's a really good indicator to try to find people to fade, to kind of go to your point on it. It just gives you a really good answer. And I think that's one of the reasons why my head-to-head model has been picking at about 60%, mostly when I condense the nature of what I'm using on it, just because you find really good bets of guys that are not in form, whether that be for current form or guys that are just not good course fits. And when the complete picture sets itself up to where the stats also don't work, then you kind of just have the grand, jackpot of what you're trying to find.
Well, what I'd add to that is I'd agree. I think that stat does work both ways, in that you can find guys who consistently perform well to play and guys who consistently performed poorly to fade. But I do think the consistent poor play on a course is probably more predictive. A guy just doesn't play well at certain courses, doesn't suit their swing or what have you. That's probably more predictive, because with playing well, there's a few guys that we'll talk about in a minute who have consistently been like in the teens. And like, what does that mean, right? That is not going to win you GPP. Obviously, they're doing something right. They're competing pretty well, but they haven't gotten top 10. So it's like a little awkward. It's like you still need so many things to go right that I think it's more predictive of the negative than the positive. But either way, I do think it's super helpful. So thanks for that, Spencer. Sia, how about you? What are you looking at for the course this week?
I mean, how am I supposed to follow that up, Joel? I don't even know what to say. I mean, if I'm I'm happy to take Spencer's opinion here, but if I'm looking at just kind of a more, I don't know, macro breakdown, some of the stuff I've put in my model, other than the basic metrics, obviously it's a birdie fest. So, birdie or better gained, birdie or better percentage, whatever kind of website you're looking at. The proximities between like 75 and 150, I think, are pretty important, because versus tour average, particularly 100 to 150, you're definitely going to see a lot more shots from that range than your regular PGA event. Outside of that, I mein, I'd like to have guys that are getting it in the fairway. I understand that's not a prerequisite, but we've got really big greens here, and I really, the greens in regulation percentage as the weekend unfolds is going to be a little misleading, because you could hit a green in regulation and be, 70 feet away, and you could hit a green in regulation and you're, 6 feet away. So I'm looking for guys who can get themselves in a really good position to stuff it against the tee. And so that's approach is going to be like kind of paramount for me here this week.
Yeah, for me, I took a bit of a different approach for myself this week. I kind of weighted more than I normally do around the green game. I'm looking for guys who are going to be able to kind of clean it up and get those birdies around the green and things like that. I was pretty off the tee game for the most part. I think that almost was the lowest weight I had put on. But really what that's doing for me is making me kind of go closer toward bad drivers, right? Because now I'm basically just saying, if driving is holding you back, then it shouldn't be a negative here. So if the rest of your game makes you a pro golfer and you compete while being a bad driver, then this course should kind of neutralize your weakness. So that was kind of my thought process for the most part. But the standard stuff, other than that, our approach as always is going to be important. Like I said, around the green. And then I've a new thing I've been doing. I've mentioned this now for a few months, but now it's a staple in my process: putting. I went from being something that I would kind of think it was mainly luck to, no, it's not luck. What I learned early is, and what I'm seeing is, when we get to a lot of the advanced metrics, guys like, Doug Gim and Matthew Naismith, they tended to pop because they had really good iron play, but they consistently were poor putters, and they were never getting there. And so I've come to realize that guys who are good putters, that does carry over, and that does mean more than just, hey, it's luck one week or versus another. So that is something that I'm starting to weigh heavier and heavier into how I break down each week. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Let's go right into the top range. We'll go right in for the DFS purposes. Sia, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's hard. It's hard to have a huge negative for anybody that's 10,000 or above. There's a couple guys that I'm focused on. One of them is going to be maybe a little different from you guys because he has no experience here, but I think he's the best golfer in the field, and that's Viktor Hovland. Speaking of a guy who can get really, really hot on approach, I just like him quite a bit. Again, I'm weighing him versus the field here. And so, yeah, Brooks Koepka, Burns is hot. Brooks Koepka, technically has more accolades by a long shot. Webb Simpson is here, who has pretty great course history, but it's not like elite course history in my opinion. When I weigh all of those guys against each other, I keep coming up with Viktor Hovland. The other guy I like, and I really hesitated with this one, but I just couldn't deny A, what the model was telling me, and B, just sort of his form and the fact that he's finished fourth place here twice. Now it's 2 missed cuts as well, but that's Abraham Answer. I think he might be more of like a cash game play for me, depending on ownership, but I think Abraham Answer is a pretty smart play, particularly in cash. So Answer and Hovland, I was going back and forth on Will Zalatoris. I think I'm out on that. It's going back and forth on Sam Burns. I think I'm out on that. Rick and Greg Ducharme tried to convince me on Webb Simpson, and I just don't think I'm there. So if you guys like him, then maybe that'll shift the pendulum a little bit. But that's who I like in this elite range.
Just because you said Webb Simpson, I'll step in there first. With Webb, I actually think he's a really good cash play. I don't like him for GPPs, not at this price. I just don't think he makes sense. I don't think there's enough upside, but I do think he's a pretty safe floor. So if you want to put him in cash lines, I'd be okay with that, because I think top 20, top 25 is something that I do see out of him. Spencer, how about you? What are you looking at up here?
Oh, I can't promise that Nick doesn't do the Better Golf Pod with me anymore because of me mentioning Webb Simpson every single week. I think he got sick of hearing that from me. But I will agree with you that I think he might be the best cash play on the board. But I kind of like him for GPPs also. But, similar to last week, 5 of the top 9 golfers are in this range for me. But I will say I'm not as convinced that we are required to start here. I don't see a massive difference between most of these players in the drop down in the 9K range. It doesn't mean I don't have a few golfers I will be using, but that's just kind of my thoughts with it. Sam Burns would probably be the one that is a fade for me. He graded just outside the top 20 in all iterations of how I ran my model. My belief is that his distance will get somewhat negated. That doesn't make him a blow-up candidate by any means, but it just suggests that my model believes he is the least likely to pay off his second place price tag. Koepka at 11,100. I think he's MME only if you're really trying to leverage ownership in a large field contest. He's inside the top 12 for me in all iterations of my model, although he doesn't grade first anywhere for being the highest price golfer on DraftKings. As I mentioned, that typically indicates more of an MME type play for me, where my model does view him as a negative value, but he's still grading well enough where he's popping in that section. That's my thoughts on him. I agree completely with C on Victor Hovland. I think this is going to be the hardest one for me to shake here. Feel like he's sitting on a big result, having averaged 3.79 shots with his irons over his last 8 and 2.65 off the tee in his last 16. He's gained off the tee in 19 of his last 21 and ranks 6th in total driving. All things considered, he's probably my favorite play up in this top section. Answer at 10,400, kind of as Sia was saying with that too. Models are going to love him. I don't think you're going to find a model that doesn't like him this week. He's 4th overall for me, 3rd for upside, 8th for safety. But I've talked about this exact scenario on this show with you guys before. I just think he's overpriced when he gets put up in this section. This is a better course fit for him than we typically get. But I'm not sure the upside is quite what everyone believes it to be. He'll probably finish inside the top 25 and he'll look fine on paper. But I'm not looking for a popular safety play when constructing a GPP build. I think there's $9,000 golfers that have just as much upside as he does, if not more. Simpson is going to be the chalk answer, as I said, that I am going to be willing to play here. We've just seen this narrative countless times where he's almost bulletproof at certain venues. The Wyndham Championship is the more pronounced definition of that. But even here, he has recorded 4 straight top 20 results. I think he's, as I said, one of the must-have cash options, but I think you can get creative with him in GPPs. And then my real concern with Zalatoris is just that he doesn't make enough birdies over 4 days for an event like this. I find him to be in this weird zone where I'd rather pay up or down for certain golfers. I don't necessarily have an issue with him, but can't play everybody. So at 15%, I'm out on him. So for me to just quickly wrap that up, Hovland and Webb are my favorite plays where I'm willing to eat the ownership in GPPs if I start in this range. As I said, I'll be using Webb heavily in cash. I'm more or less out on Burns and Zalatoris because of where they are priced, and Answer and Koepka are probably game-specific type looks for me.
I like it. I think I'm kind of similar as I felt last week, where I just feel like this top range, they're all good plays. Obviously, these are the best golfers. There's nothing wrong with them. But in terms of GPPs, as everyone knows, that's mainly how I'm looking at this. I think the combination of the highest price tag with kind of the highest ownership, there's a lot of ownership up in this top tier. To me, it's an easy pivot off of it. It doesn't seem like it's a necessary to go into this range. I can be balanced. I can save some ownership. So to be honest, I'm really not very heavy on any of these guys. Now, if I'm going to play a lot of lineups, I will sprinkle in some of these guys just because they're the best players. But I'm talking my lower percentages, and I will be more focused in the next range below. So, with that being said, Spencer, why don't you kick us off in the 9K range?
Yeah, so I like this range a lot, as you just said. I think there's a lot of potential pivot options, and I agree. I don't think you need to start in the 10,000 range. I think when you get the ownership to condense into one section, you kind of get things that open up below. So I'll run through some of these guys. Obviously, some will be more cash game plays than others, but Louis Oosthuizen in 9,900. I think he should have playability across the board because he's made 16 straight made cuts and upside at the specific test. He ranks 2nd on Betgrass greens and 1st in strokes gained total over his last 24 rounds. There's still a little worry on my part about his ability to make birdies in bunches for a shootout like this. That just naturally makes him a better cash play when you look at that. But I think he does possess a contrarian nature for GPPs just because he's around 10% owned. Scotty Scheffler at 9,700. If you look at my model this week and anybody who uses it, you will notice Scheffler doesn't grade out exceptionally well with the way it was released. But one of the things I like to do is alter certain variables on my version to try and see who moves when something is added or subtracted. And Scheffler will remain GPP only because there are some red flags with it. But some of them are easy to explain, which one of them being the fact that he's never finished better than 74th here in 2 tries. So let me start with that, and I'll work my way down from there for other reasons. But if you remember, he played the Shriners Tournament last year, having taken off 3 weeks in a row because of COVID-19. So I'm willing to throw that result out entirely. And even his 74th place finish in 2019 is more aberrational than anything else when you consider the fact that he entered Saturday 8 under par and within striking distance of the leaders. 2 poor rounds of golf plummeted him down the leaderboard on the weekend. That's something my model can't tell the difference in with the data, with the way that it's put together. But, I don't like heavily altering stats when I release it from a pertinent data point. I'd rather somebody else make that decision. But the other thing I really liked about him is that he ranks 61st in my model for strokes gain approach over my long-term time frame. But I think you can discount that also for a few reasons. So he's gained with his irons in 5 of his past 7, but maybe even more importantly than that 61st place ranking isn't differentiating an easy course from a hard course. When I dial my data in to show only how he scores at tracks that are easy, he's 6th overall in this field. This situation reminds me a lot of Homa at the Genesis, where he was lightly owned and my reconfigured model loved his potential. And I think we get the same spot here where the public will be underweight on him, at least for where they should be, but his upside wins this event if we get his best. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why I think he's just a better play than Answer. You get him for cheaper, you get him for lower ownership, and I think you get better upside with him. Hideki at 9,500 is fine. I think, I'm not incorporating as much putting as you are, Joel, with it. So you're always going to get a little bit more of a ideal setting for what Hideki shows up. I think that if I really was going to play him, I'd want him to be 6 to 8% owned. It doesn't seem like we're going to get that. So based off of that reason, I'm probably going to be out. I think English at 9,300 is probably my second favorite GPP play behind Scheffler. He ranks inside the top 25 in my model for strokes gained tee to green over his last 24 rounds, and is also inside the top 16 in my model over the last 2 years for scoring at easy courses. Sung Jae is kind of trending in the wrong direction. The one thing I'll say about Sung Jae is he was number 1 in my model, at least from an overall perspective. He's lost strokes with his irons the last 2 weeks. I think that's something worth noting on it. Maybe I'm big braining my own model here, but if I'm going to give Scheffler a boost for what the changes I made for him, Im definitely suffers the opposite fate. And then I like Sibu Kim at 9,000. 4 top 30s in his last 5 starts, 2 top 15s here in his last 3 appearances, top 10 in my model at short courses. I think he fits nicely into a cash build and is still usable in GPP. So for me, Scheffler would be my favorite in a GPP. English would be my second favorite. And I think I can find a way to fit in Sibu Kim.
I like it. See, how about you? What are you looking at in this range?
Let me ask you first, or one of you two, because I'm looking at different ownership projections than you guys are. I'm just looking at a different site. Where do you seeing Scotty Scheffler at? Because my number is pretty high, and I'm surprised by it, so I think it's wrong.
I mean, I have him at about 10.5%. Maybe
Okay.
I'm too low.
No, I don't think so. Actually, to be honest with you, the site I'm looking at, which will remain nameless, I don't think is as great with ownership projections, particularly not earlier in the week on a Tuesday night. So that's why I was asking, because I don't think this number is right. Okay, yeah, because Scotty Scheffler is not somebody I considered, but honestly, Spencer, because he's a guy I normally like, and Joel, I know it's a guy you normally like as well. And given sort of the reasons, not excuses, but reasons why, he has those finishes over the last 2 years here, it certainly makes sense. So that's definitely somebody I'm going to be willing to play in GPPs, whereas like Answer might be more of a cash game play for me, as would be like a Webb Simpson. I think Scheffler is a way smarter GPP play. And I shouldn't have even said, I think. I mean, that's like an actual fact that this lower rostered guy is going to have more upside from a GPP standpoint. So the other 2 guys I like are the ones that Spencer just mentioned. I like Louis quite a bit. I think when you're looking for guys, the one watch out for him is when I looked at sort of his proximity buckets, 100 to 150, 75 to 100, he didn't really grade out as well as I would have thought over the last 36, 50 rounds. But honestly, the game just seems so perfect. He's just going to hit it in the fairway, and then he's just going to stick it near. Like, it's such a, like, almost like a lazy, like Like, this is just how Louis plays. And I think I know there's a different narrative about Louis in terms of being able to string birdies together, but I just don't see a reason why he can't do it here. He was top 20 in 2021. That's not anything amazing, but honestly, he's been in great form. I mean, his recent play has been good. His play in 2021 was great. So the other guy I'll mention is Sibu Kim. I mean, he's got 2 top 15s over his last 3 attempts here, including an 8th overall last year. Speaking of 8th overall, he was 8th last week, 11th the week before that, 29th the week before that at the BMW, 2nd at the Wyndham. I mean, again, I think this is really truly is a good course fit, especially like Spencer said, on those shorter courses. I don't see him being really high owned because the percentage I'm seeing is pretty low on him. So I think he's a really smart GPP play and a great pivot off of. I'm seeing high numbers on Kevin Na, and I know his history is great here. But if people are rostering a lot of Kevin Na, I like Siwoo as a pivot.
Did Kevin Na withdraw?
I believe so.
Oh, did he? Oh, my bad.
Yeah, okay. And I unfortunately, that's one of the sad things about this is I think it was a really good pivot off of Kevin Na, and now obviously people are going to have to make that decision here. So I think that's going to boost Siwoo's numbers a little bit because I was out on Kevin Na as it was. So, I mean, that's the unfortunate part of it.
That's so weird because Kevin Na he'll usually wait till 3 or 4 holes in the first round to withdraw, but whatever. Okay. Changed man, I suppose.
He had some good luck. He started winning tournaments. All of a sudden he's like, okay, I'll be better friendly. I'll start letting him know. I'm the opposite with this group. I like everybody. So unlike the first tier, I'm like, I could probably fade the whole thing. I'll probably have a couple shares of everybody in this tier. But to simplify, I'm with you guys. I think we're all in consensus. Louis is my favorite play. Louis is just, I think we forgot Louis was the best golfer in the world for like a 2 or 3 month stretch last year where he was just killing every tournament, first or second. And then it wasn't not that much has happened since then. There's a couple tournaments where he still did pretty well. It wasn't like he was terrible. I think he missed 1 cut or 2. And we're kind of it's been a couple weeks, so we're kind of done. It's not that far removed. So you're right. It helps that this course seems perfectly fit for his game where he should be able to go up and down. And so I like Louis a lot. And my second play in this tier, I think that I like a lot that we didn't talk about as much as Harris English. And it's kind of for a similar reason. Harris English came back from what I guess an unknown injury, was playing great. He never slowed down, and it just kind of feels like, now it's a more loaded field, and he's kind of playing second fiddle to some of the other guys. But I think Harris English is playing as well as anybody. So I think 2 guys right there that I am more than happy to jam into my lineups and then kind of start with or build from there. So that is the 9K range. Why, Sia, do you want to kick us off in the 8K range?
Yeah, let me read a couple comments first. We've got Charlie says, thanks for the help last weekend, fellas. My biggest win ever. I can't remember how much he won, but I do remember the screenshot. It was quite a bit. So I know he goes by a different screen name in our Discord, but Charlie works really hard at this. So I'm really glad he took a big one down, or a couple big ones down. AZN Shorty. I think this is Yamazaki in our Discord. Congrats to Joel for his recent 20K win in college football. So that's back-to-back weeks. He killed it. Nice promo for his Friday night show. He does a Friday night show at 8:00, which is really excellent. I always stop in a little bit as well. But Joel, any comments to AZN Shorty here?
I appreciate it. Keep coming back in. It was a big week. And I will say, listen, DFS goes in streaks like anything. And, so there's some weeks in golf where I just feel like I'm seeing it really well. And I have a good feeling I know I'm going to win. That's where I am right now with college football. I'm on a heater. The picks feel good. I'm going into each week with a lot of confidence. I know I'm plugging the show, but everybody who's watching seems to be winning too. You guys check it out. We're doing well.
Yeah. Again, Friday night at 8:00, if you're not going out, there's just no reason not to turn this on. It's, again, you found it on our YouTube channel. We have a video hub at windailysports.com. It'll all get retweeted out from the main page. But Joel, congratulations. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, you asked about the 8K range. I'm going to lean on you guys a little bit here because the only guys I like in this 8K range that I know I want to play are kind of at the bottom. Honestly, Eric Van Rooyen might be my favorite at 8,000 just because, I feel like he's sort of and by the way, I don't think he has any history here, but I think he's sort of out of everybody's consciousness because we haven't seen him in well over a month, I think. Well, at least not since the Tour Championship, but he went on that heater just to qualify for the FedEx Cup playoffs. He did well in the FedEx Cup playoffs. He was 5th at the BMW, 7th at the Northern Trust, and then 22nd at the Tour Championship, which of course isn't really that great with that narrow field. But I just think, if the ownership is low, which what I'm seeing, it is pretty low, I think this guy's playing really, really well. And I think we're all going to be reminded of it and kind of feel like, oh man, like, what were we thinking once he actually shows up for this tournament. So that's a guy at 8,000. I think I want to take a chance on. I'm not really fond of anybody. Normally I would be on a Jason Kokrak. So if you guys want to convince me there, that's fine. But his history here just really isn't very good. I think Corey Connors is very interesting. The recent play is good. The course history isn't very good. His putter really kind of makes me nervous. I'm not going to be on Paul Casey. The only other play I even want to mention, and I know Adam Scott has ties here, so I'm curious if any of you are on him, but I think Patrick Reed is an interesting GPP play, or at least I thought I did, but the ownership I'm seeing is a little higher than I thought. But with Patrick Reed just kind of being off the radar, I thought at this price in this field, he made a lot of sense. But I'm going to wait to hear from you guys on the 8K range because I'm more in the 7K range in terms of the guys I really like.
I like this range a bit more on the bottom end of the range. I'm with you. I think especially for a GPPs, it feels like Patrick Reed is underpriced. As a guy who in this field, if he was not the top price guy that he shouldn't be, but if he was in the 10K range, you wouldn't have bet. You'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. If he was ahead of Will Zalatoris, you wouldn't be surprised by that. So down at 8,600, when you look back at a winning lineup, if you saw that it was Patrick Reed in it with some of these other big dogs, you would be like, oh, that's such a smart play. So for that reason, I really like Patrick Reed. And for me, I think at the top of this range, I agree with you about Connors and Kokrak. And, Paul Casey, I'm the most on the fence on just because he has shown such great flashes recently. But, I just don't think his game is designed for this course. Doesn't seem like it's the best fit. So for me, it's Reed. I really like Tringale. Tringale has the combination of history, form, and doesn't really have a glaring weakness in his game. Now, he's not the best at anything. He's also not the worst at anything. He's probably just above average in most stats. And of course, where I think, he's done well in the past, he's affordable. My only concern with Tringale will be, let's see where the ownership ends up. Right now, it's a little higher than I would like it. I think I would like to play a Tringale at around 8 to 10%. And right now I'm seeing around 12. So if that goes up, I will probably move off of him. But if it goes down, then I will definitely be playing some Tringale. And then, you would, on paper, the thought of Matthew Wolff here, you kind of would be like, I don't know if this makes sense. But this is where I go back to, how Wolff can be really wild off the tee. And that gets him in a lot of trouble. I don't think he'll get him as much trouble here. And I think when he has some of those bad tee shots, I think he can recover better. And I think it will help him to continue to compete. So for that reason, I think there's some upside with Wolff. I wouldn't go crazy because he can also ruin your lineups. Him, he has the ability to implode. So he'd be someone that I would put in some GPPs, but wouldn't go overweight on. I think Joaquin Niemann's in pay. I don't love his recent form. He hasn't shown us a pop recently, but he's affordable and he's a guy that, has as much upside as anyone. He's the same kind of thought process as I was saying with Tringale in terms of ownership. If that number starts dropping to 10 or below, then I'm going to be in. If it's going above 12, then I'm going to look in another direction. And that's probably it for me here. I think we can find some similar value in the 7K range. Spencer, how about you? Who are you looking at here?
Yeah, so one of the things I noticed is Paul Casey does seem to play well at similar venues that Webb Simpson does. That's one of the reasons why he is in play for me. He's gained with his irons in 13 starts and off the tee in 6 of his last 7. He's a top player in my model for the weighted tee to green that I ran. Patrick Reed at 8,600. I know he played the Tour Championship after missing time in the hospital because of pneumonia, but the break hopefully has done him well. I typically prefer Reed at a difficult track, but Bentgrass is his best surface, not to mention that he does or should probably have a chip on his shoulder after not making the Ryder Cup team. I would consider this GPP only. And before I continue on it, I was curious where both of you guys are seeing Reed's ownership at.
I'm not confident in my numbers. Believe it or not, I'm pretty sure I saw it at close to 15%, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I see him at 8. I mean, to me, if he's sub 10%, he is just way too good to be priced here and not generate traction. I agree it's a different play at 15%. So, I mean, as these numbers come in, I guess we'll get a better idea of that. I like Cameron Tringali at 8,500, as Joel said with it. I think he's doing everything but win over these last few months. He has 9 made cuts in his last 10 starts. 6 of those finishes have resulted in a top 26, and he ranks inside the top 50 in all 8 categories of my model this week. There is some lack of win equity if you want to look at it like that, but the price tag is cheap enough to take shots at GPPs, especially as Joel was saying. I mean, if he can be in that like 8 to 10% range, I like him a lot more than if he's in like that 12.5 to 15% range. And then I like Joaquin Niemann at 8,300. I'm kind of willing to excuse what he did at Eastlake, just because that's a venue that will sometimes catch up on a golfer where everything implodes and it implodes badly. But I think his recent numbers actually look okay. He's gained off the tee in 31 of 34 starts with his irons in 17 of 20. He probably has as much upside as anyone we can find in this $8,000 section that's not named Patrick Reed. So I like Niemann and Reed as kind of your dart throws here that are grading out well for me. I am going to play Casey just because I think there is a correlation to some extent with Webb Simpson. And I like Webb, I think, more than everybody else does. And then Tringali makes a lot of sense too, with the way he's been playing lately.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think we're all pretty aligned so far. So this is a good thing. This means we're seeing a lot of similar things. So I'm going to kick us off in the 7K range. I'll start at the top. I think Russell Henley is interesting. I really like mainly his price. I think Russell Henley could have been, $1,000 or 8,500, and we wouldn't have batted an eye. And then coming in at 10%, like I just think there's a lot more value from GPPs of having a lineup full of Russell Henleys and Patrick Reeds. It's all balanced than going for the chalkier guys up top and then trying to find some dart throws down low. So that's kind of the look and feel of my lineups. I think Aaron Wise is also in play here. He has looked pretty good. His last 2 outings here, he missed the cut, but before that, he's at the 15th, 32nd, and 10th. So he has had success here. And we know with Aaron Wise, he's very hit or miss. What I like about him, he's made his last 5 cuts, which for him, that's really good. What I don't like is that he's 7.9. Aaron Wise is the type of guy I prefer to play at like 7,000 as like the sleeper guy, not as someone that's kind of almost one of your main guys. So, that's where you got to kind of make a choice. If I do play him, it'll probably be small, and I would recommend him more for GPPs than cash. Now, a perfect segment for good chalk, bad chalk would be Mito, right? Like, it's like he's chalk. I mean, people are playing him. Everyone knows who he is now. He's not going to be sneaking up on anyone. The price is okay. I think this is a completely fair price. I wouldn't have mind. I think he could have been priced higher. So I actually think we're getting a good number on him. I'm in. This is a chalk I'm going to eat. I think he's playing really well. I think he's probably a better golfer than the number, and that's why I'm going to buy even with the chalk. I think if it was 20% at 8,500, I probably would pass, but I think this number seems too good to be true. So for that reason, I'm in with Mito. And then after that, I'm going to just go down to the 7,500 range and cut it from there. So, after that, there's not too much I'm that high on. I think Ryan Palmer is someone I might consider for GPPs. His recent form is concerning, but he does have a decent history here. And then Brian Harmon is someone who I'm definitely interested in. He's got a great history. I mean, 3 top 20s in his last 3 outings. His recent form, again, has not been great, but I think there's a little bit of an over-adjustment with him in that he was playing some of the best golf of his life, over the summer. And now he's just coming back to the norm of Brian Harmon. And, Brian Harmon is what he is. He's a $7,000 golfer that's above average. And when you find a course that he likes, I think he can outperform that. So coming off of his hottest streak, I think, I got a little bit more down on him because I was like, oh, he's not playing as well as he was a couple months ago, but that's okay. He was elite playing for a few weeks. Now he's back to being, above average. And again, this is a good course fit. He might find some of that hot form he had over the summer and compete this week. So that's what I'm looking at here. Spencer, how about you?
I will add to this, and I'm not so sure that this still remains true, but I know it was true as of a couple years ago. Aaron Wise, his home course is TPC Summerlin. So Yeah, so that's an interesting note with him. I do think he makes sense, but I don't have a ton of guys I love from $7,500 and above. Henley would be the one that sticks out to me like a sore thumb with it. He was shaky in his last start at the BMW Championship, but he had gained at least 5 shots tee to green in his previous 5 events. We keep running into this trend with some of these options where I'm not sure they can make enough birdies to win the event. But the reason why I'm willing to forgive Henley for ranking 72nd in my model for overall birdie or better percentage is because of how he performs at an easier test. It's kind of the same theory that I talked about with Scotty Scheffler, in the sense that some of his data gets skewed at harder tracks that he plays. I think we should see a more robust outcome when faced at a birdie fest because of his ball striking nature. I also like Brian Harmon. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's the other guy I'm going to fit into my range. I think, I guess I'll include Luke List into this, even though he's 7,200. But if we look more towards the safety guys that are grading as positive values for me, but are kind of on the edge because of popularity, Luke List at 7,200, Brian Harmon at 7,600, Mito Pereira at 7,800. Those would be my 4 largest disparities for a player that graded positively versus DraftKings pricing, but had some ownership issues. As you said, Joel, that doesn't mean they aren't playable. I think Mito makes sense to fit into a lineup, but that's about going to do it for me. I'll fit in Harmon. I will play Henley. I think Mito makes sense. But I'm going to kind of play a lot of $9,000 golfers and, roll in some other guys from there. And I have a lot of random dart throws in the 7,000s that I wouldn't have a high percentage of them, but I'm going to kind of pick and choose spots and fit them into lineups and kind of see what happens there. Cause I just don't see a huge difference past I guess it would be Harmon and Henley, where between those 2 guys and a lot of these $7,000 golfers.
One thing I'm seeing, and just want to run by you guys, the numbers I'm looking at in terms of early ownership for Luke List and Pat Perez seem surprisingly high. What are you guys seeing for those 2?
Mine are pretty low.
Okay.
For Perez, 8.6%. Who was the other option? Sorry.
Luke List.
List was 8.7%. So virtually the same.
Yeah.
Mine are lower than that. So that's why I said low, because that does sound pretty high to me.
Yeah, mine are pretty similar to Spencer's. And so that just for those golfers at this range, that just seems too high. I do think they both would have been fine value plays. But they weren't guys, these are great value plays. And so at that percentage, I'd probably fade. But let's see when we get Steven's article on a Wednesday night, what the more accurate percentage looks like before we make any commitments one way or the other. Sia, how about you? Who are you looking at here in this range?
Yeah, a lot of the guys you are. So I won't go over why you like them because I like them for the same reasons. But Russell Henley, again, we're leaning on, for me, I'm really concentrated on ball striking, but more like approach play. And if Henley's approach game is as hot as it can be, not as hot as it has been, but as hot as it can be, then he is a guy that's going to be a tremendous value at 7,900. Kevin Streelman is really interesting to me because I happen to think he's a great course fit, but his history here is pretty terrible. And his recent form really isn't that much better than his course history. So to me, he would normally be a guy I'd be like, no, I'm just out. Give me one of those 2. Give me course history or recent form. But if you can't give me either, then I'm out. But I do want to change things up a little bit this year. If I think somebody's a good course fit, I'm just going to play them. And I think he's going to have his ball in the fairway, which I understand isn't critical here, but I think he's just going to have a lot of opportunity to stuff it close to the pin. I know I keep overusing that phrase, but I just, again, at 7,800, he doesn't have a tremendous amount of upside, but it's just one of those things where I don't think the course history here is who Kevin Streelman is. So I think he's an interesting pivot off of Masher Mito Pereira, for example. I just, and you'll see that in the ownership that he's going to be, drastically lower than Mito. I do like Mito, however. Maverick McNeely is another guy who's kind of like Streelman, where course history isn't very good. Recent history is kind of whatever. Actually, well, he had a second place, but prior to that, it was kind of middling. But again, this is a birdie fest, and we know McNeely can succeed there. So even though the course history isn't very good, I might take a shot there. I absolutely love Brian Harmon. I think, in a few weeks, we could be looking at him in a similar similarly situated tournament from a talent standpoint, he's 8,400. And I think that goes for every player here, by the way. And Joel, that's why I think your balanced lineup approach makes a lot of sense, because there's plenty of guys in the 9K range that in 3 or 4 weeks will be in the 10K range. And, some of the 10K guys will be down in the low nines. Like, there's some of these guys that just, are going to fluctuate over the next few weeks. So we may as well anticipate that fluctuation as opposed to playing it right here, right now. As far as other 7K guys I like, Sahith Theegala is interesting. Props to Spencer and his partner on Be the Number Pod, because they've been all over him the last couple weeks. And I was on him a little bit last week. As I go down towards like the low 7Ks, I happen to also like Pat Perez, by the way. But again, if his ownership even comes close to 10%, I am 100% out on Pat Perez. But I did like how he graded out. I'm going right back to Henrik Norlander. This guy is really, really playing well. He's playing like the Henrik Norlander of like 12, 16 months ago, before he just went on this awful stretch. His putting has been good. His approach play has been elite. Like, I think last week he gained 8.36 on approach, and that's not an aberration. It was only 4 tournaments before that he gained 7 point something on approach. So this is like the perfect setup for him. If he keeps that approach play anywhere close to what it has been, and he finds a hot putter, which he tends to do here and there, this guy is going to be a guy that could be there on Sunday, just like he was last week, by the way.
My only concern with I love me some Norlander, and you know that. My only concern with Norlander is the early percentage ownership looks high, very high. I have him over 10% right now, which for him I don't love. But again, I don't know how accurate that is. So let's see what we get come Wednesday night. Before we move on from this range, I want to ask. So you did mention him so before he was mentioned, but Sahith Theegala. I'm curious. He played great last week. Spencer didn't really come up in your takes. Where are you on Sahith?
So Theegala on my spreadsheet, if I'm just running a statistical model on it, he's 20th overall, 23rd for upside, 13th for safety. Obviously, that safety number is showing just like the recent form with it. So he looks better than maybe he actually is. I don't know. I mean, I think he grades out well for me. He's one of the guys in. I guess I bypassed him when we were talking about this range, but there's essentially, and maybe this is a good transition into the next range also, but there's 8 guys for me. So I'm trying to figure out how to say this correctly. So essentially when my model looks at differential between ownership versus my rank, that gives me a completely different thing than when I look at my rank versus the price tag on it, if that makes any sense with it. So essentially what this is trying to find is it's trying to find guys that I am higher on than ownership consensus would be throughout the industry. All these guys are extremely volatile. They may even be negative values for me when I run my model. But the top 8 differentials that I had, and as I said, extremely volatile plays, I would be putting them into lineups with caution, but Stewart Cink at 7,100, Kevin Kisner at 7,400, Sebastian Munoz at 7,000, Rasmus Højgaard at 7,100, Cameron Davis at 7,300, Sahith Theegala at 7,500, Cameron Young at 7,000, and Taylor Moore at 7,300. I mean, that is like, those are going to be my dart throws in. I agree with Joel on this. Like, I'm going to have a more balanced approach for the most part. With this, I won't need as many of these guys as I would on a normal week, but random guys that I'm going to fill into a lineup. Like, I like Henley and Harmon the most for a core play with it, but those are guys that I'm going to sneak into a lineup. I agree with your guys' take on Perez. I don't like the ownership where it's at. He graded really well in my model. I think you can make an argument that he's trending in the wrong direction here recently. But the mixture of this being an easy course and bent grass encourages me that he could produce another good performance. He's had 2 top 10s here since 2016. So that'll be an ownership-based play. And then I really like Ian Poulter down here at the bottom. I think he's kind of trending across the board with his strokes gain data. He's the 53rd most expensive player on DraftKings, but 30th in the betting market. That's the 3rd largest disparity behind Hayden Buckley and Adam Hadwin. So I think I'm going to fit Poulter into plays. And then I guess the only other one I will mention, because he missed kind of all the ranges of what I just talked about, he was the next name up, would be Ryan Moore at 7,000. I don't know. I think at some point I might need to quit the guy because I feel like I'm on him every single week and it's not working with him, but he's just barely missing these cuts. This is a course that he does find success at. He's a Vegas guy from UNLV with it. So, I don't know. I'm going to approach cautiously with Ryan Moore because I'm kind of sick of getting burned with him. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of Henley and Harmon for me. And then it's just going to be dart throws with all those guys, which I guess the Gala will be one of them that will be included into that mix. And I'll probably have a little bit more Poulter than any of those other guys.
So I have a few questions for both of you. And you brought it up at the end there, but my first was going to be, do you have any correlation with Ryan Moore and being a Vegas guy in this tournament?
I mean, I hate the idea of correlating because a person's from somewhere or went to a school somewhere that they have to be a good play for a tournament. But my model really likes him, and my model really likes him every single week, unfortunately. Like, he's 30th overall for me, so I have him as a positive value there, and he's 7th in overall birdie or better percentage with the way I ran it, 20th at TPC courses, which is obviously taking a little bit of what he's done here. I mean, a 13th in 2019, a 36th in 2018, a 15th in 2016, in between that, a 51st in 2017. So I think Moore fits this course perfectly, but I mean, like, the current form does not look good with all the missed cuts that he's had. Like, obviously he turned it around a little bit at the Sanderson Farms, which is what's going to make me buy back in from coming 39th. But before that, miscut at the Fortinet, miscut at the Wyndham, miscut at the Barracuda, miscut at the 3M Open, obviously a second at the John Deere, which is nice. And maybe that's where you can fit him into a GPP lineup. But I think this is a perfect course fit for him to find success. Now, whether or not he turns that into something is another story. But as I said, I think he's missing these cuts barely. I think a lot of those missed cuts are not as bad as they look. And
then you didn't mention Seamus Power. Something broken? I thought you were. What happened there?
So Seamus was 41st overall for me, 32nd from an upside perspective. If I look from a GPP build, he's a value. It's probably just the course history number that I'm getting from him. But he's a better player now. Like, I don't want to look too much into that, but did miss the cut at the Sanderson. I think that there are reasons why he makes sense. Fine in the weighted tee to green metrics I ran. He hasn't been good overall at TPC courses. I guess that's the other thing that took him down, but I don't have a problem with Seamus. I mean, he kind of is right in that range of, like, you could go either way in my model with him. And if you look from a GPP perspective, like as an upside perspective, then he does great as a very slight value. So I don't have a problem playing Seamus. Like, my model likes Seamus, as everybody knows at this point, but not as much as it usually does for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I like Seamus. The main thing I love about him is I just think his price is too good. I think he's a better golfer than the price tag. I don't think he's necessarily a great course fit, but this is a guy that we know has a lot of upside, and below 7,500, it's just a good value.
And he makes birdies. He's been a birdie maker, so it seems like it could be a fit for him. He rates out really well in my model, but I didn't put him in my initial picks article. I kind of just glossed over him, and I don't know if that's some recency bias at play here, and I'm just realizing it this moment right now because I kind of want to play Power.
Oh, yeah, I'll definitely have my shares, especially for GPP. Just, again, it's one of those things where it's like looking at roster construction when he's your second lowest price guy and it's Seamus Power. Like, yeah, I can win a tournament with him being one of my lower price guys. The last guy in this range I'm going to mention, then we're going to move on because we are running tight on time, is I think, Spence, you briefly mentioned Kevin Kisner. I think he's a good course fit here. I think he's not that far off from his big win. I think he's playing well. Any positive or negative takes on Kevin Kisner?
Yeah, I mean, I like Kisner from an upside perspective. Like, it's going to be GPP only with it, but he was inside the top 8 of my differential with the way I ran my model with it. So I think anytime you get that where I don't know what kind of ownership you guys are seeing on him, like, I see him at sub 1% right now. So I think when you get that it makes a lot of sense to, like, take a shot with Kisner just because he's too good to be in that range. And it doesn't always work out. He might miss the cut, but I think it makes a lot of sense with, like, a guy like Seamus, a guy like Kisner, that you're just getting golfers that are a little bit too good when they are the second to last guy into your lineup, as you said, Joel.
Totally. I'm with you. Love that. All right, let's wrap this up. We're going to do the 6K range, and then we'll get into our outright market. So in the name of time, why don't we go into the 6K range and give our favorite 3 plays each? Would that work?
Yes.
All right.
Sure.
Steve, will kick us off?
So I'm going to buck your rule and just list a bunch of players.
All right,
I said yes, but I was lying. In the moment, I knew I was lying, but I said yes. Okay, so let's start with there's not a lot of guys I like in the upper 6K range. I just like the, quote, dart throws that are in the 6,500 and below range. So that's really where I'm starting. Chesson Hadley, I'm just going to mention because he has had some good recent form, and his history here is actually quite good. James Hahn, I can make the same argument for, although his recent form, he hasn't shown anything, but he has good history here. So I wanted to point out James Hahn as well. Tom Hogue at 6,400. Listen, this is a guy that can get really hot on approach, and we've seen him do that. And his history here is pretty good as well. Hank Lebiota. Listen, man, this guy, the fall from grace is real. He's 6,300. And I just think he's shown the upside for him to, I mean, granted, he hasn't shown it recently, but he showed it for a good, 4 tournaments in a row. I just don't think it went away. I don't think those 4 tournaments or however many it was a complete flash in the pan. So give me Hank Lebiota. I do want to point out, I think it was Coach who sent me something on Harry Hall. Harry Hall played here at this course, TPC Summerlin, like 6 days ago, and he shot a 12 under. It was like a par 72. He shot a 60. Well, it was a par 72 when the day he played it. I think it's a par 71 here for the big boys. But anyway, he's 6,000. He's the min price. I believe he's from here. And I think everybody I just said has an H in their name. Hank Lebiota, Harry Hall, Tom Hogue, Chesson Hadley, James Hahn. Let's throw in KH Lee, and we've got our all H team in the 6K range. I did also mention one non-H guy. I think I might have mentioned Kyle Stanley, 6,100, the worst putter on earth. That's going to kill him here, but he is a good ball striker. Maybe he can get hot for a few days, 6,100. I just think it's weird seeing him that low.
I feel like I have to add Adam Hadwin for you just because it makes sense in the H narrative.
That's the H pivot.
That's the H. That's a good one. Oh, I love it. Spencer, who are you looking at down here?
Well, if Sia can't abide by the rules, I guess I won't either. But, I don't want to touch too much on, because I think Sia did a really good job. These will just be rapid fire. I think Kyle Stanley at 6,100, James Hahn 6,400, Hank Lebiota, Harry Hall, UNLV guy, Hayden Buckley, Adam Long, Mark Hubbard, William McGirt is like as volatile as you can possibly get. I don't know why my model seems to like him. I mean, he's less than 1% owned. I don't mind taking a shot there. But if I'm going to touch on, I guess, Matt Kuchar, you could throw in there too at 6,600. Good at TPC properties. I think the length may help him a little bit. But my 2 favorite plays in this range to get back on track, probably Hadwin at 6,800. I usually fade him in head-to-head wagers, but I love how this course sets up for him. 3 top 35s here since 2016. While he is volatile, missing 3 of his last 6 cuts, he has 2 top 10s recently. And then the other one that I'm going to throw into lineups would probably be Nick Taylor at 6,300. I like how he performs at short courses. He's going to be less than 1% owned probably. And he has 3 top 36 finishes in Vegas during his last 4 attempts. So Hadwin's the one I like the most. And then it's going to be a bunch of like Taylor, Shank, Kuchar, McGirt, Adam Long, Buckley, Hall, Lebiota, Hahn, Stanley. Just those random guys that you want to throw in that a lot of those guys have a specific skill set that maybe they're good at, maybe they can't putt, but maybe they, hit this week.
So Sia has a rivalry with a golfer. His hatred is so strong. He was able to list like 10 6K range golfers.
Yes.
That were all pretty good. And he excluded
a guy that actually makes sense at this tournament. Yeah, go on.
Harry Higgs, his mortal enemy, he somehow found a way to make sure that he can list 12 guys all their names start with H in the 6K range, and did not include Harry Higgs in that range, which is unbelievable to me.
He has 2 H's, so that makes it even worse.
Exactly.
But for me in this down here, because of my balanced approach this week, I'm going to do very, very few dart throws down here. There'll be a few guys I might look at, but for the most part, I don't need to be spending too much time down in the 6K range. For the few guys that I am interested in, I think Scott Piercy is interesting. He also has a really good history here. His around the green game is elite. So for someone who could be a pretty good course fit and not come in at a very high ownership.
And Joel, he's a Vegas guy as well.
Yeah, he lives in Vegas.
That is new information that I like him even more. So we will be playing some Scott Piercy for sure. And then, after that, I think there's some guys a little bit lower. I think I'm interested in someone like a Peter Malnati, who also has a really good course history. Coming in at 6,500 allows you to really cram some of those guys you like up in there. And I know I mentioned him a lot. He's definitely a GPP play, but I think JT Poston we can go back there again. He's so volatile. He's so hit or miss. Like he can kill you. Don't play a lot of them, but if you're going to put a bunch of lineups and you want to take one shot on him in one of them, I think that would be okay. I think that's it for the most part. I'm surprised Sia didn't mention, or you might have. He is an H name, so maybe I just missed it. James Hahn, did you mention him?
I did. I mentioned him. Yeah.
Okay, so there's James Hahn, and I guess no one can follow. I can't even follow my own rule. The last person I'm not sure if we said was Brian Stewart, who I think is a really good course fit. His game should work well here. Let's not forget he was the darling pick like 3 tournaments ago, and like he kind of fell off, but is not that far removed at this price point. I think he grades out pretty well here.
What's his price, Joel?
He is.
Oh, I see it. It's 6,300.
6,300. Yep.
Wow, that's really low.
Yeah,
Wow.
I like the Stewart call also. He's somebody I guess I had overlooked with it, but he has like 40 something spots of value in my model from, which is very substantial. So I like that call on your part, Joel.
An extremely volatile player at this tournament, as you'd expect in the 6,300 range, with a lot of missed cuts, but also a 4th place finish in 2020. So there's something to be said for that in this range.
For sure. All right. I like it. That's good. That's the player pool. I think we gave out some winning plays. You got some options to choose from. Now, before we wrap up today, let's touch on some outrights. See, do you want to kick us off in the outright market?
Yeah, I've got 4, and I'll just be super quick with them. Victor Hovland, I just said I think he's the best player in this field. It's not a sexy number at 20-1, but whatever. I think it's I don't want to say there's value in the number in a full field like this, but I think it's a pretty good number. I'll bet it. Hideki at 28-1. I think he's another one of those guys that might be, we might find out after this tournament, or we might realize, hey man, this guy was kind of mispriced at 9,500. Like, what, why is Answer and Burns ahead of Hideki? Like, we get it because of their recent form, but like, are they really better than Hideki? Like, it's the pricing here is very interesting. So please don't get, those of you who are formulating lineups over the next 2 days, don't get caught up with the pricing. Like, just look at the players that you like, that we like, and make your team. If there's a guy in the 8,700, he's 8,700, and there's a guy at 9,600, it doesn't mean that the 9,600 guy is better. Just please understand that, because we all fall into that trap. So Hideki, I'll go with Mito at 50-1. I think it's a good number. And then finally, I'll go Norlander at 130-1. Those are my 4.
I love it. How about you, Spencer?
Yeah, I have 4 also. So Harris English at 32-1, Joaquin Niemann at 48-1. I had to make a tough decision between Scotty Scheffler and Victor Hovland. I ended up going with Scheffler at 23-1. Hovland was the one that missed out for me. I like the Hovland call on Sia's part. I mean, I think that if he wins this tournament, it's not going to surprise anybody. And I actually think the number is fine at 20-1. It's just exposure kind of adds up when I'm in the sub 50-1 range. And then nobody's going to love to hear this, but I took Webb Simpson at 30-1 on FanDuel. I just think that's a really big boosted price. I mean, he's 18-1 at a lot of places. My model thinks he should be the favorite to win this tournament. So if you're going to give me him at 30-1, and then I guess just as a random other thing that they're out there, my favorite head-to-head bet this week, Sibu Kim -112 over Jason Kokrak. That's -120 at a few offshore books and -130 on DraftKings. So I think that's a good number on FanDuel for Sibu over Kokrak, who seems to be trending in the wrong direction at this point.
I like it. I'm going to give 4 plays to them, but I'm going to give you guys 2 complete Hail Marys. So I have 2 151 plays. The first is Adam Schenk at 151, and the second is Denny McCarthy at 151. So again, Hail Marys, but I think these are 2 guys that have the upside to win. They both have been playing pretty well recently. So if you want to really try and bankrupt the casino, then we can take a shot at it there. But then I think my more realistic plays, I like, let me just double check the number to make sure I get it right. Mito at 50-1. And I think it'd be a nice shot to take in the 80-1 range. It's actually 2 guys. There's Ryan Palmer and our guy, Seamus Power. So I think those are just 2 really good numbers for those 2 guys. I almost like Ryan Palmer more as a bet of an outright than I would in a GPP and a DraftKings lineup, because he's one of those guys that if he's hitting it and playing well, he does have the upside to win the tournament, but he could also just easily miss the cut. So those are some of the tickets that I would punch, but more I'm swinging for the fences. So not something that I'm picking with safety. Now let's go to where we really make our money in the first round leader market. Spencer, why don't you kick us off? Who are your first round leader plays?
But I will say, based off of what you just said too, I like that Palmer call on your part. I mean, I know we didn't talk about him at all, and he probably does make more sense as a bet, but I really like where your head's at there. But I have 3 first-round leaders this week. So Emiliano Grillo, 85-1, Scotty Scheffler, 40-1, and I wanted to make sure I had some Victor Hovland exposure. So Victor Hovland, 35-1.
I love it. I love it. For my first round leaders, I'm going to keep it, again, we're swinging for the fences. We're going to try and hit a home run on the first day. So for starters, I got Hank Lebiota at 150-1. I have Spencer's boy at 180-1, Dirt McGirt for your first round leader. And then the more realistic play, someone that I think we can actually get there at 60-1, I like Brian Harmon. So, Sia, where am I putting the bank? The whole bankroll, where's it going?
Man, this is going to blow you away, guys. My breaking news is just really going to break the bank. Like, sports books need to be careful at this point. Okay. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to save this for later. Okay. Let me just start with Hideki Matsuyama at 40-1. Okay. I think there's value there. We know he can get hot. Obviously he's elite, but we know he can get hot in first rounds as well. Russell Henley at 60-1. I like that. EVR was almost going to be the breaking news. I wasn't in love with the number. He's also 60-1. Henrik Norlander at 90-1. If you remember, he was my breaking news as first round leader last week, and he kind of got close, actually. Ended up finishing 4th overall. I agree with you, Hank Lebiota, 150-1. So that's 5 that I've given out. Decky, Henley, EVR, Henrik Norlander, Hank Lebiota. But the breaking news, folks, on October 5th, I'm giving this out at 9:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, otherwise known as 6:07 Spencer's time, Vegas time, Shriners Open time. I'm telling you that on Thursday, 2 days from now, your first round leader, this is crazy. This is so crazy. I need you to invest all your money in this first round leader who, crazy enough, is 180-1. He's 180-1. He is an absolute lock, obviously, to be first round leader. His name is Tom Hogue. It's another H guy. Tom Hogue has shown an ability to get hot in any round, but particularly in first rounds. And 180-1 is just a nice little number. This guy has good finishing positions here in the past. He's in okay form for Tom Hogue. And that's your breaking news. Everybody go out and spend money you don't have because you're going to have it in a couple of days. You're welcome, America.
We have fun with this, babe, but I want to add to that. Tom Hogue is absolutely a first-round leader type guy. Like
100%.
You always notice, like he's competing day one, and he ends up being terrible and falling apart.
Right.
But he's always competing day one. He's right. He's always.
You know what's funny? In those day ones, he really plays the part. Like you're like, oh man, this guy's on fire. He's all confident. He's just pouring it in. He's stuffing it, from 150 out, and it's like, man, this guy, like, how do we not hear about this guy all the time? And then like Saturday rolls around, and it's like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad I didn't roster him. So anyway, Tom Hogue, 180-1.
I'm in, sold. That's how we're getting rich. I'm putting all of it on it. I've already got a second mortgage coming out, so I can really ensure that we make all the money when he is.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm selling this entire background here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a garage sale tomorrow. I don't have one, but I'm going to somebody else's garage. I'm selling all that stuff because I know I'm going to be able to recoup it after the first round. 100%.
See, you should sell everything up except for your hair because that's too good. You can't lose that. But other than your hair, you should sell everything you have. Put it on this bet.
That's right. It's done. Consider it done.
Yeah, that's very easy. All right, guys, that's a wrap. There might be one more thing. See, did we forget something?
Well, I mean, I have an announcement to make. Frankly, sports.